Theo stood inside the Vance garage in a faded gray flannel, grease still under his fingernails. In front of him, an Atlantic blue Bugatti Chiron Supersport sat with its hood open. Preston laughed once, loud enough for the 8 people in the bay to hear. "You think you get to touch this? $1.8 million. Della stood in the doorway, arms folded. She did not move. June stood behind her father, gripping her sketchbook with both hands. Theo looked at the engine for 1 beat. Then he looked up. "Give me 10 minutes. Cut to black. 6 hours earlier, the phone in the Stamford kitchen rang at 6:15 in the morning. Theo answered on the second ring. Henry Carter's voice on the other end was rough from coffee and from the early hour. A private garage in Greenwich needed a backup mechanic. Their lead had taken a fall off a road bike Friday afternoon, broken his right wrist in 2 places. The client was a VIP. The day rate was $900. Theo looked at the kitchen ceiling. The water stain in the corner had grown another inch over the winter. June's school bill for the spring term was sitting on the counter, unopened. He pictured the roof, the bill, the pickup that needed 2 new tires before snow. "I'll take it." He hung up. June was already at the table in her pajamas, hair sticking up on one side, listening. "Can I come?" He started to say no. Then he remembered it was Saturday, and that she had spent the whole week at her grandmother's after school. He nodded. "You sit in the corner. You don't touch anything." "I won't." The drive from Stamford to Greenwich took 22 minutes. They went past stone walls, hedges trimmed flat as paper, brass plates that read private drive. The Ford F-150 he had bought used in 2009 rattled gently over the cobblestones when he turned in through the gates of the Vance estate. He parked between a McLaren and a Rolls. The pickup looked like a dropped tool. Preston came out of the garage to meet them. He was tall, in a pressed black shirt, with the Vance crest stitched at the chest. His eyes went from Theo's boots up to the rolled cuffs of his flannel and stopped there a moment too long. "You're the one Henry sent over? I thought he was sending a specialist. I'll do the work I came to do." Preston turned without offering a hand. Inside, the garage was longer than a tennis court and twice as bright. 12 cars sat in numbered bays under track lighting. The floor was painted concrete, polished to a low shine. Della came down the open staircase from the office. She wore a gray linen dress, her hair pinned at the nape of her neck. She shook Theo's hand once, briefly. Her gaze stopped for a second on June. "Children rarely came here." "You like cars?" she asked. June nodded. "Which one's your favorite?" June looked across the bays. "The blue one. The Chiron." Della almost smiled. She glanced at Theo. She did not say anything. She went back up the stair. Preston walked Theo through the floor. He assigned 3 cars for routine service. An Aston Martin, a Porsche 911 GT3, and an old Mercedes SL with cracked leather. At the end, he stopped, and his voice tightened. "Don't touch the Bugatti. That one is mine." Theo nodded once. He set out his tools on a rolling tray and went to work. He worked the way his father had taught him, which was without wasted motion. The 2 assistants in the next bay, a young man named Marco and another named Jin, slowed down to watch him without meaning to. Marco glanced at Jin. Jin shrugged. At 10:30, an alarm went off in Bay 4. The Bugatti had started, and the dash showed a misfire on cylinder 1 and a hybrid system, warning that nobody in the room recognized. Preston went pale. Preston tried to play it down. He said it was a sensor glitch. He cleared the codes. 40 seconds later, the same codes came back, and a third one with them. He cleared them again. They came back. He cleared them a third time. They came back. Della appeared in the doorway, Margot a step behind her. Margot was 62, gray hair cropped at the chin, hands folded in front of her apron. "There's a regional concours showing tomorrow afternoon," Della said. Her voice was low and unbending. "This car has to be on the lawn." Preston wiped his hands on a rag he did not need. "It's a Molsheim issue, the hybrid module. We'd have to ship the car back to France. 3 weeks at the earliest." Theo, in the next bay, was wiping his hands on a clean towel. He looked up. From 10 feet away, he could see the diagnostic screen on Preston's cart. "It's not the module," he said. He was not loud, he was not soft. "It's the secondary crank position sensor. It's reading false because someone retorqued the mounting bolt at the wrong spec. The garage went still. Preston turned. The color came up in his face fast. Who do you think you are? Do you have any idea what this car is worth? 1.8? Theo said. I know. Preston laughed for the second time that morning, and this time he made sure everyone heard it. You think you get to touch this? Theo looked at Della. Della looked back. The pause stretched. Then she gave the smallest nod. 10 minutes. Theo crossed the floor without rushing. He opened the hood with one hand and braced it with the other. He ran 2 fingers along the edge of a wiring loom, found what he was looking for, and reached in. The 2 assistants stopped what they were doing. Theo had touched the engine the way a violinist touches a bow he has owned for 30 years. He removed 1 bolt. He pulled the sensor. He held it to the light, looked at the contact face for 2 seconds, blew on it, and seated it back. He retorqued the bolt by feel. He plugged a cable into a port that Preston had not opened in 18 months and entered a service menu through a sequence of inputs that, as a matter of policy, only Bugatti technicians in Molsheim were given. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. The warning lights went out. He started the engine. It came up clean, even, no fault. The sound filled the bay. As Theo lowered the hood, Margot was watching his hands. He turned a wrench left-handed, his pinky finger slightly curved, in a way she had seen exactly once before. In a photograph on the second page of a French magazine, her late employer had once placed on her breakfast tray. She heard him murmur, just once, under his breath in French. Voilà, ma belle. Margot's face did not change. She turned and walked out of the bay without a word. Theo wiped his hands. He stepped back. Preston was a statue. June, in the corner, had her sketchbook open and her pencil moving fast. He started for the door. Wait, Della's voice. He stopped. Tomorrow afternoon, I need a mechanic with me at the concours. Not Preston. You. He did not answer right away. He looked at June. She gave him a very small nod. All right. The regional concours was held on the back 9 of a country club outside Greenwich. The real Pebble Beach was 3,000 miles west. This was its East Coast satellite. Smaller, but with the same kind of money walking the lawn in linen blazers. Theo wore a navy polo with the Vance crest on the breast. Margot had sent it to the house by courier at 6 that morning, with a note that read only, "Your size," in a careful hand. June came too. Della had insisted. She knew the name of the Chiron, she had said over the phone. She'll like it. The Bugatti sat under a white awning with a velvet rope and a small printed card. Collectors drifted past, asked the usual questions, and Della answered them with the practiced ease of a woman who had grown up around men who measured each other by their cars. She introduced Theo as the technician with her. A man in his late 60s came over alone. White linen jacket, a watch Theo recognized as a vintage Patek. He introduced himself as Reginald Thorne. He owned, he said, a small collection that included a Type 57. He looked at Theo a second longer than at the others. Then he asked a question that was not a small-talk question. He asked what Theo thought of the torque vectoring split in the new tourbillon, specifically about how the differential was being signaled. Theo answered briefly. Split-axis preload before the differential signal. He used 3 words that were internal Bugatti shorthand, words that were not in any sales brochure or any magazine. Reginald's brow drew down. Where did you study? I read a lot. Theo turned the conversation to the paint on the Type 57. Reginald let it go, but his gaze stayed on Theo for another beat before he moved on. Della had heard the exchange. She did not ask. But from that moment forward, when she looked at Theo, she looked at him the way she would have looked at a chess player she had underestimated. In the middle of the afternoon, she found him on a wooden bench at the back of the lawn, behind the awning, eating a hot dog with June. She sat down at a polite distance. May I see your sketches? June opened the book. The newest page was the Chiron's engine bay in blue pencil, with the secondary crank sensor circled and a small arrow pointing to it. Beside the arrow, in careful block letters, June had written the torque spec her father had used. Della looked at the page for a long moment. Then she looked at Theo. She drew this from memory. She remembers things. Della did not press it. But she had seen children draw cars before, and they did not draw them like this. This was not a child's drawing. This was a technical sketch with a child's handwriting on it. On the drive back, Della sat in the front beside her driver. Theo and June were in the back. Halfway home, Della turned around in her seat. Starting Monday, I need a full-time mechanic for 3 months. Preston is taking medical leave on his doctor's advice. The official reason was the wrist. The real reason was that Della had told him, that morning in her office, not to come back until she sent for him. $8,000 a week. What do you say? Theo did not answer immediately. He thought about the school bill. He thought about June. He thought about the 8 years in Molsheim and the 4 years of silence after. I'll give you my answer in the morning. I'll wait. That night, in the kitchen in Stamford, June looked up from her cereal. Are you going to take it? Theo looked at the small framed photograph of Eleanor on the shelf above the toaster. He did not answer right away. 3 weeks went by. Theo was at the Vance garage by 7 each morning. June went to school in Stamford. Eleanor's mother, Margaret, who had moved in with them after the funeral, picked her up at 3 and brought her home. A routine took shape. Theo worked alone in Bay 5, the bay reserved for the cars with the highest insurance values. Marco and Jin worked across from him. They had stopped pretending not to watch. They asked questions. He answered them in short, complete sentences. He showed Marco how to read a vibration through a wheel hub by pressing the back of his wrist against the spindle. He showed Jin a way to clock a timing belt that took half the time of the way Jin had been taught. Della came down to the garage 2 or 3 times a week. She always brought 2 coffees. She never explained the second one. She would ask about the work, and then sometimes she would just stand there and watch him for a minute or 2 before she went back upstairs. On a Wednesday evening, she came down later than usual. The garage was quiet. Theo was under the Aston, adjusting the suspension. She handed him the coffee and stood beside the bench. Your wife. It was not a question. It was a statement she set down between them. Theo wiped his hands on a rag. He looked at the floor for a moment. 4 years ago, she was having our second. Neither of them came through. He did not add anything. Della was quiet for a long time. The ventilation fan hummed in the rafters. My father died 3 years ago, she said. Stroke. I was in a meeting in Tokyo. She did not add anything either. They stood there. The fan ran. Eventually, she set her empty cup on the bench, touched the steel briefly with 2 fingers, and went back up the stairs. From a window on the 2nd floor, Margot had watched the whole exchange. She had decided 2 weeks earlier not to say what she knew. It was too soon. Della needed to see it for herself. At the end of the 3rd week, Preston came back. His wrist was still in a cast. He said he had come for his things. He moved through the garage, slowly, stopping to look at each car as if he were saying goodbye. He stopped longest at Bay 5. You won't last here, he said. Maybe not. Preston left. The security camera in the back hallway caught him stopping at the small office at the end. He opened a drawer, took out a flat black hard drive, and slipped it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Friday, June came to the garage after school. Della had told her she could. She's quieter than most adults, Della had said. June sat on a stool at the back of Bay 5 and drew. Della came down with a cup of hot chocolate and set it at her elbow. June said thank you without looking up. Theo watched from across the bay. What he felt was not longing. It was a kind of gratitude he had not allowed himself to feel for 4 years. 6 weeks in, Della came down to the garage with a folder under her arm. She set it on the bench. She did not open it right away. There's news, she said. A new tourbillon is coming. The first one delivered to a North American customer. Walter Vance had been on the Bugatti waiting list for that program since it was announced. The relationship between the family and the company in Molsheim went back to the mid-1990s, when Walter had bought a freshly restored EB-110 directly from a former engineer at the factory. 3 representatives from Molsheim would fly into Westchester County Airport on the following Wednesday for the handover. They would stay 1 night, sign the documents, walk through the technical brief, and leave on Thursday morning. Theo's face did not change. His hand, on the bench, closed slowly into a fist and then opened again. He looked at the rolled cuff of his sleeve. 3 Molsheim representatives. He could know them. He could not. It had been 8 years. I'd like you to handle the technical receiving, Della said. Inspect the car before I sign for it. I need someone in that bay who knows what to look for. He nodded. You're someone I trust. The sentence came out before she had decided to say it. She did not correct it. She also did not look away. He set the wrench down on the bench. For the first time since the morning he had walked through the front gate, he asked her something personal. Why me? She considered the question. She did not answer for a long moment. Because you don't say more than you have to. I have spent the last 15 years in rooms full of men who do the opposite. I've stopped trusting most of what I hear. You're someone I have not stopped listening to. He looked at the bench between them. He breathed out slowly. I need to tell you something, he said. Before the car comes. What? He paused for a beat. He had thought about how to put this on the way to work that morning, and the words he had prepared had not been the right words. There's a chance they'll recognize me. She went very still. The fan in the rafters turned over once, twice. Recognize you in what way? He did not answer. He pulled off his work gloves and folded them in half along the seam, the way his father had folded them when he came in from the garage at night. I'd like to leave early today, if that's all right. She watched his face. She did not press. Go. He went. The side door clicked shut behind him. Della stood alone in the empty bay for a long time. The lights buzzed overhead. The Aston sat half-finished on the lift. The Chiron was in its corner, blue and silent. Margot came down the stairs without her usual quiet step. For the first time in 6 weeks, she spoke first. Mademoiselle, there is something Monsieur Walter kept. Would you like to see it? Della followed her up to the second floor and through the door of her father's old study, which had been kept exactly as he had left it on the morning he had flown to Tokyo. The leather chair behind the desk was still angled the way he had pushed it back when he stood up. Margot unlocked the lower right-hand drawer of the cherry desk and took out a thin folder. On top of the folder was a clipping from Le Figaro, dated 2018. The paper had yellowed at the edges. The headline read, L'architecte silencieux du tourbillon, the silent architect of the tourbillon. The photograph below was of a younger man, leaner in the face, standing beside an engine on a stand, with the small, patient smile of someone who had been asked to pose and was waiting politely for the photographer to be done. The caption underneath the photograph gave a name, Theodore Marsh. Della looked at the photograph for a long time. Margot stood quietly beside her, hands folded. Monsieur Walter bought from Bugatti partly because he believed in this man, Margot said. He kept this article from the day it was printed. He read it more than once. Della closed the folder. She did not say anything. She went back down the stairs alone. She did not sleep that night. She sat in the chair by the window in her bedroom and watched the dark line of the trees move slowly against the sky. 10 days later, the tourbillon arrived. The transport opened in the courtyard at 10 in the morning. 3 men from Molsheim stepped down from a black SUV. A logistics manager, a quality engineer, and the director of powertrain engineering. His name was Etienne Lefebvre. Theo stood at the back of the receiving line in a plain Vance jacket. He kept his head a fraction down. Etienne shook hands with Della first, then Margot, then walked along the line of technicians the way a man walks along a row of cars at an auction, eyes moving carefully, not slowly. He stopped. He looked again. He stepped out of the line and crossed 5 feet of gravel. Theodore. The garage went silent. Della stood at Etienne's shoulder, watching Theo. Theo lifted his head. Etienne. Etienne pulled him into the kind of brief, hard embrace that 2 men give each other when they have spent 7 days a week together for years and then lost touch. He held Theo by the shoulders for a moment afterward, looked at him, and turned to Della. Madame, do you know who you have standing behind you? He wrote the hybrid control software in the car you just received. We have been looking for him for 4 years. Della did not answer. She had known since the night before last. She looked at Theo. Theo looked at the gravel. While the moment held, Margot came in through the side door of the garage. She was carrying a second folder and a small black USB drive in a closed hand. She walked to Della and stood at her elbow. Mademoiselle, when you have a moment, Della excused herself. She and Margot stepped into the office at the side of the garage and closed the door. The footage on the USB was from a security camera in the back corridor. The timestamp was 6 weeks earlier, the night before Theo had first set foot in the garage. In the footage, Preston was bent over the open hood of the Chiron with a torque wrench in his hand. He turned it the wrong way, 3 full clicks past the spec, then stood up and wiped the wrench on a rag. He moved next to the McLaren and reseated a module backwards, sealed the cover, and walked out. The second folder held bank records. An LLC with no public officers, registered in Delaware, traceable through 3 layers to Reginald Thorne, had wired $420,000 to a personal account in Preston's name in 3 installments over 8 months. Margot had pulled the records through a contact at the family's old accounting firm. "I have had this for 2 weeks," Margot said. "I wanted to be certain before I gave it to you." Della took the drive. Her hand shook once and then stopped. She looked through the office window at Theo, still standing in the courtyard with Etienne. He did not yet know about Reginald. He did not know about Preston. He only knew that he had just been recognized in front of 20 people. Della turned to Etienne when she came back out. "Thank you. We'll sign for the car in 20 minutes. Excuse me." She walked past Theo toward the corridor that led to the main house. Theo followed at 3 paces. In the quiet of the corridor, she stopped without turning around. "When were you going to tell me?" "When I had a reason to." "What reason?" "A reason to come back." She was silent for a long moment. "I have a reason to show you, but not now." She walked back to the courtyard and signed for the car. Etienne, before he left, took an envelope from his inside pocket and pressed it into Theo's hand. "They never stole. Holding a chair for you, Theodore. Open it when you are ready." 3 days later, Della called a closed meeting at the Vance Holdings offices in Greenwich. The people in the room were Della, Theo, Margot, Della's personal counsel, Adair Whitcomb, and Preston Halloway. Della played the footage on the wall screen. Preston went the color of paper. He started to say it had been edited. Adair, sitting at the end of the table, did not raise her voice. "We have a forensic certification of the file. Attached to it is a record of $420,000 wired to your personal account from an LLC traceable to Reginald Thorne. 3 transfers. 8 months." Preston stopped talking. Della laid 2 folders side by side on the table. "You have 2 options. 1. You sign a separation agreement, return the bonuses paid over the last 18 months, and waive your right to sue. 2. I make a phone call. Sabotage of high-value property is a federal matter. The FBI will ask the same questions, but the answers cost more." Preston signed. Security took him out the side door of the building. When the door shut, Della turned to Theo. "Now you." He nodded, waiting. "Tomorrow morning, 10. Board meeting of Vance Holdings. I'm going to put a deal in front of 9 directors. We acquire 41% of Thorne Capital. The man who tried to ruin my collection is going to be a minority partner in his own firm by the end of the week. To get the vote, I need an independent director to sign off. I want you in that seat. I'm a mechanics. You're a man who designed an engine that the industry has built $4 billion of inventory around. The board will sit and listen when I introduce you. And I need someone in that chair I trust. Not for the money." He was quiet. He thought about June. He thought about Eleanor. He thought about the years of being only what he had chosen to be. "I'll be there." That evening, Della drove herself to Stamford. Theo's house was a 2-story on a quiet street, blue-gray clapboard, an old maple in the front yard. June opened the door with both hands and her eyes went wide in a way she did not try to hide. Della was carrying a small wooden box. "From my father," she said. "To yours, through me, 10 years late." Inside the box was a 1/18th scale model of a Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic. Hand-built, the rivets along the spine perfect. On the underside of the chassis, engraved in small letters, was a line. "To the engineer who taught my collection how to breathe. W.V. 2018. Walter Vance had commissioned the model after reading the Le Figaro article and had sent it to Theo through the Bugatti factory office. By the time it had arrived in Molsheim, Theo had already left France. The package had come back to Walter unopened. Walter had kept it in his study, on the lower shelf, for the rest of his life. Theo took the model in both hands. His fingers closed around the small chassis. His shoulders moved once. June, beside him, reached over and put her hand on Della's hand. It was the first time someone in this house had touched her for a reason that was not a greeting. Della stayed for dinner. There was no wine. There was pasta and a salad and a basket of bread Margaret had made that afternoon. Theo told a story about Eleanor, about the night they had driven from Boston to Stamford in a snowstorm with a flat spare in the trunk and only the highway numbers on the green signs to guide them. It was the first time in 4 years he had told a story about her to someone outside the family. When Della left, she paused on the porch. "Thank you for letting me in. Thank you for not asking too soon." She drove home. Theo stood on the porch until the headlights were out of sight. From inside, June called, "Daddy, is she coming back?" Yes. The Vance Holdings boardroom was on the 36th floor. The windows looked east toward Long Island Sound, gray and flat in the November light. 9 directors sat around a long oak table, coffee in white china, folders open. The first slide was already on the wall screen. Della stood at the head. She did not introduce Theo as her mechanic. She introduced him as the former lead powertrain engineer at Bugatti Engineering, co-author of U.S. Patents 9, 2, 3, 4, 887 and 9, 891, 442, currently an independent automotive specialist consulting to Vance Holdings. His resume came up on the wall screen. 2 of the older directors lifted their heads at the same moment. They had read the patent numbers in due diligence reports going back 5 years. One of them, a man with a white mustache who had run a private bank in Boston for 2 decades, glanced down at his folder and back up at Theo with a small adjustment of the eyebrow. Della laid out the deal in 12 minutes. Vance would acquire 41% of Thorn Capital at $280 million, valued before the news of the sabotage broke. Once the news broke, the share price would drop, and the option windows in their proposed term sheet would let Vance pick up additional shares at the lower number. The math was tight. The legal exposure was contained. The reputational play was clean. Vance would announce the acquisition and the recovery of the damaged cars in the same press release before any other paper had the story. A director near the middle of the table, a woman in her 50s with a banker's posture and reading glasses pushed up on her hair, asked Theo a direct question. "Mr. Marsh, what do you think of Thorn's technical portfolio?" Theo set his hands on the edge of the table. He named 3 weaknesses. The first was a power electronics supplier with a single-source contract that was 6 months from expiration and that had not been renegotiated. The second was an unaddressed thermal limit in their flagship platform that would surface in summer testing somewhere south of Atlanta inside the next 12 months. The third was a software licensing dependency on a German firm that, in the event of an acquisition, would need to be renegotiated immediately or it would lapse on a change of control clause. He named 2 integration opportunities, both involving software stacks that Vance's existing portfolio companies could absorb without redundancy and without laying anyone off. The room listened. The vote was held by show of hands. 7 in favor, 2 abstentions. The motion carried. After the meeting, the directors filed out. The man with the white mustache paused at the door and gave Theo a nod that contained no words but a great deal of acknowledgement. Della stayed at the head of the table. Theo stayed in his chair. The doors closed. "I'd like to make this permanent," she said. "Strategic advisor, $200,000 a year, flexible hours. You can keep the shop with Henry. You can pick which weeks you're here. I need to think. June, Henry, the shop. I want to do this carefully. I'm not in a rush." He looked at her across the empty table. "Neither am I." They rode the elevator down together. Neither of them spoke until the doors opened on the lobby and the cold air from the revolving door reached them. "There's a lake in Litchfield," she said. "Lake Bantam. My father used to take me up there when I was small. I haven't been back in 3 years. Would you and June come with me this weekend?" "Yes." That evening, Theo came back to the empty garage at Stamford and opened the envelope Etienne had pressed into his hand 4 days earlier. Inside was a single sheet of letter on Bugatti Engineering letterhead, signed by the CEO in careful blue ink. The position offered was honorary consultant. No relocation, no fixed hours. 2 weeks of presence in Molsheim per year, expenses covered. The figure at the bottom of the page was in 6 figures of euros. Theo read it twice. He folded the letter in half. He set it on the kitchen shelf beside the photograph of Eleanor. He did not decide that night. Lake Bantam, in Litchfield County, lay flat and dark under a sky the color of old pewter. It was the last weekend in September. The sugar maples on the western shore had begun to turn at the tips, the red moving down each branch a quarter-inch at a time. Della had borrowed a small wooden rowboat from the caretaker, an old man named Russell, who had known her father since the 1980s and who had asked no questions when she had called him on Thursday night. There were sandwiches in a basket and a steel thermos of coffee on the bench seat. June walked along the gravel beach with her shoes off, picking up red leaves and sorting them by size. Theo and Della sat on a weathered bench above the waterline. The bench had Walter's initials carved into the underside of the seat, where a small Della had carved them herself when she was 9. Della told him about her father, about the call from Tokyo, about the meeting room she had stayed in, 15 floors up over a dark city, while a stranger on the other end of the line told her her father had been unresponsive for 40 minutes by the time the ambulance had arrived at the house in Greenwich. She had not been there. She had been in a hotel conference room negotiating a port lease that, looking back, she could no longer remember any detail of. Theo told her about the night in the hospital, about the long hallway, about the promise he had made to Eleanor as the monitors slowed and the nurse stood very still at the foot of the bed. He had promised he would bring June home to Stamford and that he would not let her grow up missing anything she could see. He had not said anything about what she could not see. He had not known yet what that was going to cost. "You kept your word," Della said. "I kept part of it. The other part I buried with her. I thought that was how it was supposed to be done. Was it?" He did not answer right away. He looked at the surface of the lake. A breeze moved the water. A single duck pulled a long V across the cove and slowed and stopped. Maybe not. There was a long silence between them. June came back up the beach with both hands full of red leaves and held them out to Della. Della took the bunch carefully. June's fingers brushed her wrist. June did not let go right away. Her small hand stayed there, light and warm, for the length of 2 breaths. Then she ran back down to the water. On the path back to the car, Della stepped on a wet stone at the edge of the lake and her foot went out from under her. Theo's hand caught her elbow before she fell. They stood there. Neither of them pulled away first. Neither of them said anything. June, 3 steps behind, watched them. She did not smile. She did not say anything either. She had understood already, and her understanding did not need to be spoken. In the car on the way home, June fell asleep in the back seat with the leaves still in her lap. Della drove. Theo sat in the passenger seat. The highway lights ran across the windshield in long, even strokes. Della. "Yes, I'll take the position, strategic advisor, but I keep 1 day a week at Henry's shop. He's getting older. He needs me on the floor." "All right, a pause. And the Bugatti letter. I'll write back. No, this time, my reasons are here." She did not say anything. Her hand tightened on the wheel for a second. He saw it. He did not say anything either. Outside the window, the dark line of the Connecticut hills moved past. June's breath was even in the back. The road went on. It was April, 6 months later. Saturday morning at the Vance garage. Not a ceremony, just an open day for 10 high school students from a vocational program in Stamford. Theo was teaching. Della stood at the back wall, leaning against a tool chest, watching. A boy in the front row asked him where he had learned to work on cars. "My father," Theo said. "A small shop. Then somewhere a long way from here. Then I came back to my father's shop." He did not say more than that. June, 10 years old now, stood beside Della with her sketchbook open. She was drawing the new tourbillon from memory. Della bent down to look. "This is better than last month. You taught me how to measure proportions." After the class, Theo and Della walked out into the courtyard. The sun was warm on the cobblestones for the first time that year. A flatbed truck had pulled in earlier in the week with a covered shape on the back. The cover was off now. Underneath it was a Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic, the real one, not a model. It had come from the Thorne collection. As part of the legal settlement, Reginald had sold it to Vance Holdings at a number well below market. He had retired from active investing the month before. "Do you want to drive it?" Della said. "You drive, I'll sit next to you." She slid into the leather seat. Theo took the passenger side. June climbed in the back. Della turned the key. The engine, 91 years old, came up smooth, then settled into a deep, slow idle that filled the courtyard. Theo smiled. It was the first smile in this scene. They drove the Atlantic along the small private road that wound through the back of the estate. The maples were just starting to leaf out. The sky was clear. Della parked under a tree at the far end of the road and shut the engine off. None of them moved. The Type 57 sat warm under the hood, ticking quietly as it cooled. An old thing, still running. "This one will run another 100 years, Theo said quietly. "If somebody looks after it." "Yes," Della said. She did not add anything. That evening, Della came to Stamford for dinner. It had become the Saturday pattern. June was in bed by 9. Theo and Della stood on the back porch and looked out at the small garden. Theo took a key from his pocket and held it out to her. The side door key. He did not say anything. Della took it. She did not say anything. She put it in the inside pocket of her coat, next to her own. She did not say she would come. He did not say he would wait. There was nothing said about the future. He had once believed that there were engines that ran only once in a life, and that if they stopped, no one could start them again. He had been wrong. There were engines that needed only one hand that knew where to touch them, and one person willing to sit beside them, not asking, not rushing, only staying. And this time, neither of these two people, had gone looking for it. It had come through the door of a garage on an ordinary Saturday morning, wearing a faded gray flannel.